It's a privilege to be speaking with an accomplished award-winning communicator with a diverse background in broadcast and print journalism, media relations, advertising. He's done a lot of things, and it's an honor to be speaking with Paul Ladd. Thanks for coming on.
Josh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, tell us about your background and how you got into broadcasting.
It's something I've wanted to do since I was 12 years old. I know most people say, yeah, right. No, it's something I've always wanted to do. And, when I was a kid, I watched the news all the time. When we moved to a place that had cable, I'd watch it on different channels and say, all right, this guy's good, this guy's not good, she's good, this guy's awful, that kind of thing. And it's just something I always wanted to do. I guess, I started in junior high with the newspaper. The very first story I ever wrote was about bomb threats. We were against them, of course, but wrote a little story about that and then kept doing that. And then in college, I was fortunate to go to Lenore Community College in Kinston, North Carolina, over in the far eastern part of the state.
Mhm.
And they had a broadcast program. They had a radio station. And the second week I was there, they said, "Oh, we're going to start doing news. You're the news director." I'm like, "Oh boy." So I basically invented the news department they had there. Because before that, it was rip and read. And one of the more advanced students told us that it was illegal. It was a federal crime or something like that. But he said it was illegal to change anything on the UPI wire. Well, I mean, we know that's not true, but
Mhm.
people will believe anything if you tell them long enough. And I was like, I don't think that's right. Because I would start editing because they wrote differently.
Mhm.
It was newspaper style. There's a difference between newspaper style and broadcast style. So I did that for a while, and I was a stringer for a TV station over there. They would not ever let me be on camera. They said I
Mm.
looked too young, and that's a problem I don't have anymore. But you would occasionally you'd see my hand because people would say like, "Well, we don't see you on there." I'm like, "Did you see the interview with, you know, Senator Jones or whatever?" Yeah. I said that was my hand holding out the microphone. That was my hand holding the microphone that had the 7 on it and the little NBC logo.
Mhm.
So I did that, then went to Middle Tennessee State University to finish up the undergrad stuff. They had a radio station. I did a TV internship, and we had a student-run TV thing. I think I got to be on that 2 or 3 times. They did a newscast every night, but I got to be on that once, and it's something on videotape that will never ever be shown to the world. It was an experience. And
Mm.
after that, I worked at a local religious station in Nashville where we ran tapes. The only air check I ever got from that place was when I got to say, Nashville area weather, cloudy today and a high of 79. It was basically very, because they wanted all preaching all the time.
Mhm.
And it was brokered, people could come in
Oh
and
yeah.
say anything. I do have to tell one funny story about that place. I was there one day, and one of the ladies who bought time, Sister Mary Jane, I think was her name, calls up and she says, "Paul, I can't be there today." And I thought, okay. She said, "The Lord told me you should play music." Okay. So I called the program director to make sure it was cleared with him because they had a thing about using music. They said people want to hear just, back to back to back to back to back preaching. Okay. Go figure. So I pulled some stuff from our music library and all that. She calls back and says, "Well, what did you select?" And I told her, and she said, "Well, the Lord mentioned those." And I kept thinking, why didn't he just tell me directly? Wasn't that a safe time? But, what are you going to do? Uh, and then there was, you know, a lot of interesting stuff that went on there. We were in the street level of a condo building. So we got to see people come and go. It was quite interesting. And I met a lot of colorful characters there. I'll leave it at that. Then I went
Kind of your own,
WLAC.
was it like your own Windows on the World, like the Today Show had back in the 1950s, but on a
Almost.
smaller scale?
There were some interesting and colorful people who lived in the building too. I'm thinking like, and we didn't really know them other than, hey, how you doing? Didn't know their names or anything. So we would make up names for them. I'm notorious for that. And if I don't know somebody, it's like this man I used to know at church. I didn't know his name for the he looked like Ziggy from the comics. I said, Ziggy over there. Unfortunately, the nickname stuck with some people, and remember our minister said, I had to have a meeting with him, called him by his real name, and he said, all I could think of was Ziggy, and that's your fault. And I'm thinking like, not my fault. He looks like Ziggy. So I wound up at WLAC, 1510 Heritage Station, been around
Mhm,
since 1926. I haven't been though. We did news. I was the afternoon drive news anchor. I went out and covered stuff. I did the weekly review show.
mhm,
And I should digress and say when I was in North Carolina at Lenore Community College, the first commercial radio I ever did was a public affairs show. It ran on Sunday mornings.
mhm.
And I knew at least seven people were listening, eight if you count my dog. And because we'd listen before church, we'd be sitting in there and I'd say, that's me on the air. And she'd sit there and listen attentively. But there were some people at church that listened, and I think our program director listened. So, had an audience of seven, but you know, it
Hey,
was a good interviewing experience.
definitely. Now, who are your favorite broadcasters growing up? You mentioned the newscasters you loved, the ones you didn't love so much. Who are your favorite newscasters that you remember best?
Chet Huntley from when I was a little kid, of course, David Brinkley.
Hmm.
I like John Chancellor more. I appreciate his work more now than I did then, although I thought he was very good. Of course, everybody likes Walter Cronkite, Eric Sevareid, although his bottom teeth always scared me. He was, I always loved his very sonorous commentaries. And Morton Dean, weekend
Hmm.
anchor for CBS. When I was in junior high, I guess it was the eighth or ninth grade, I wrote him a letter. I thought, I bet he doesn't get as much mail as Cronkite or, John Chancellor or the other guys.
Hmm.
So I wrote him a letter. What should I do to become a reporter? And he wrote me back.
That's great.
And I still follow his advice to this day. Learn as many things, learn as much about as many things as you can, practice writing stories. And he said, you will have an edge over other people. His closing line was, good luck, but please don't take my job away.
Do
But he
you
was
still
very
have the
good.
letter?
I still have it.
Oh, good.
And a
Did you ever
couple
get to
other
meet him?
people I admired were Frank Reynolds and Peter Jennings on ABC.
Yeah, in fact, they were part of World News Tonight. I remember back in 1978 after Harry Reasoner left ABC to go back to CBS after having done the ABC Evening News with Barbara Walters for
Hmm.
about 2 years. They brought Frank Reynolds in Washington, Max Robinson in Chicago, and then Peter Jennings in London. And I remember watching that as a little kid, and I remember Frank Reynolds very well, very staunch, kind of
Hmm.
like very authoritative. And I was shocked when he passed away. I was about 11 years old. I'm like, what? I didn't even know that he was ill. Um,
He didn't want anybody to know. He was diagnosed with cancer right before they started World News Tonight, but he didn't tell them because he figured, they would get rid of him.
oh yeah,
And this was his second tour as anchor. He liked it much better because he was in Washington this time. And even Howard K. Smith called him, and I quote, the ideal anchor man.
mm,
I mean, he was, a lot of people remember when President Reagan was shot and somebody reported that Press Secretary James Brady was dead.
that's
He found
right.
out it wasn't, and he pounded the fist and said, let's get it nailed down. He got criticized for that, but no, he was absolutely right.
Oh, I liked that. I remember that story. I've seen that in video several times. I'm like, this is something that just we need more of that today because it's like,
Absolutely.
man, that took a lot of guts even back then because Oh, we can't admit that we're wrong, but he called it like he saw it, which was great. I think that's why ABC was number one because he had people who told it like it is. Howard Cosell in sports, Frank Reynolds in news. They weren't afraid to let their opinions be known.
Exactly. And it was labeled as such. If you're going to opine, that's fine. Label it.
Hmm. Oh yeah. I
Always.
remember. And I also remember, John Chancellor. By the time I remembered him, NBC Nightly News was now Tom Brokaw in New York, Roger Mudd in Washington, and a commentary by John Chancellor.
Mhm.
Then I found, video of him from years later that's on YouTube, including the different presidential elections where he and Tom Brokaw are projecting Reagan the winner pretty much at like 8:28, 25 Eastern time. And, just, I was like, oh my goodness. And John Chancellor's like, well, you've seen the map and we're ready to project. And I was like, just his, authority and just, it wasn't condescending. It was just kind of like matter of fact. And uh, he was the anchor of NBC Nightly News for about 12 years. And people kind of forget about him because people remember Huntley Brinkley, then they remember Tom Brokaw, but oftentimes John Chancellor gets overlooked too often.
And he was very good at what he did. He was a good writer and he paid attention to what he did and he cared. I mean, he did his homework. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't.
Mm-mm. Well, Hugh Downs, I remember when he was hosting the Today Show, he would get up probably about, I don't know, 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, and they'd be at NBC Studios by 5:30, an hour and a half before the show even began. He'd do the show for 2 hours, take a half-hour break, and then host Concentration. And eventually he did get burned out because it was just too much doing two shows simultaneously in the morning. But, that's another a great broadcaster. And, he had 20 years on 21 years on 2020, which was, great. And now you talked about your time at WLAC. Tell us about that morning show and what time did you usually arrive in the morning? Because usually it's probably a 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock show, but how early did you get there before the show actually began? And describe what usually you would go through each day, or was it so different each day? It was kind of hard to really pinpoint everything down.
Well, things changed by the day, and I was at WLAC more than once, but as far as I know, I am the only person who was there all three times they tried a morning news block. Um, and basically, I would get there usually between 3:30 and 4 in the morning, and they would have me write different things or, man the update desk. One morning I came in and they said Johnny Cash died, and I was like, okay. They said, it's your baby. So the first thing I did was I laid down a couple of things on tape for the first newscast, then went back to my house, which is about 6 minutes away from the building,
Hmm.
grabbed some Johnny Cash music, and then we did some more elaborate produced stuff later in the day. And I have to credit one of my colleagues, Buddy Sadler, who had worked at WSM for years, and he was doing an administrative role there at Clear Channel at
Hmm.
the time. He had some contacts. I had a few, but he had some people that had worked for, had worked with Johnny Cash. So we got them. We got Charlie Chase of Crook and Chase on the air. We had some different people. But that was an interesting morning. Usually we would just, do whatever. We had a young lady who would go out and do reports, except on the morning after Thanksgiving, they sent me out to a mall, which was entertaining, and that was fun. And another year, I said I'd rather go to Kmart, so I went to Kmart. And of course, they said, "Yeah, you'll do some shopping too." I said, "Well, of course. I mean, I
Hmm.
love Kmart. May it rest in
Yeah,
peace." And
exactly. They had ices there.
yes, and the blue light special.
Exactly. And
I
the cool
mean, that was
cafeteria.
yes. I love their sandwiches.
Hmm.
Their submarine sandwiches were great, and I still have one of those big buckets with the big K on it. You throw stuff in. I
Oh
use it
yeah.
for different things. Yes,
And they
I
still
like
have
to
us.
see.
Oh,
Oh,
they still have Kmart in Australia. I don't know if you
yeah.
knew that. There's like 250 stores in Australia and New Zealand because
Wow.
what happened was the SS Kresge company, which started Kmart in
Hmm.
I think the late 60s, early 70s, partnered with some Australian investors and they got the rights to use the name Kmart in Australia and New Zealand. And then by the early 80s, mid 80s, SS Kresge sold the rest of their shares to that Australian company with the, intent of keeping the name down there as well exclusively. And so it's still going strong in the land down under, to quote Men at Work.
Well, that was Kmart when Kmart wasn't cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting. When the later years at Kmart in America, they had the Kmart radio network. You'd hear
Hmm.
they'd be playing music and then they would, do little promos for things and throw out trivial stuff. I thought that's interesting, but I never got to be on the Kmart radio network. But hey, what are you going to do? The WLAC, though, back to that, it was a different thing almost every morning. I mean, I would write stuff, I would do the updates. Um, And usually the update was some kind of breaking story. If there wasn't a breaking story, then we would wing it. And there is where I started doing more magazine type interviews,
Hmm.
partially because the original idea was to have newsmakers come on live. Nobody from California wants to come on live at 2 in the morning, their
Hmm.
time, or 3 in the morning. So we would start taping stuff, and I started doing some because one of the morning hosts would leave as soon as they had the show. They had their post-show meeting, which sometimes I would be included, sometimes I wouldn't be. But anyway, they dash out the door. So I ended up doing a lot of the interviews. So I basically became the Joe Garagiola of the morning show. I was the third guy.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
or, maybe to use an analogy like I use for our current situation. ABC News had Harry Reasoner and Barbara Walters, and they did not get along. So Frank Reynolds got to be a de facto anchor. I was
Hmm.
Frank Reynolds.
Oh,
I guess
okay.
I kind of still am now, but the
Hey, good person to be. I mean,
yes,
because I
yes.
remember on YouTube they've got the 1976 or the Spirit of 76 presidential
Hmm.
elections with Harry Reasoner, Barbara Walters, and Frank Reynolds, each taking turns to project who the winner was going to be in each of the states. And it was Barbara Walters who actually officially said, "Okay, Carter wins." Although Howard K. Smith said UPI was projecting it, but then Walters said, "Okay, now ABC projects it." So it was like but it's kind of interesting that whole dynamic and stuff.
I remember that they started doing the whip arounds, which basically they tossed to one reporter who would toss to another one. So they would not be on camera that much, let alone on camera together.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it was funny because you would see Frank Reynolds, he would introduce a couple of reports, then he'd go back to them. You see Peter Jennings do that. Um, and we do some of that stuff where we are now because we don't technically we have hosts, but basically every report I do now, I introduce myself,
Hmm.
unless it has a canned intro like, and now here's today's segment of first person, whatever. But if it's me doing a story, there's bumper music and I just start talking.
Wow. Interesting. It's like, I mean, and then you talked about all these reporters you got to, you idolized. Um, which reporters did you get to interview yourself? Because you've interviewed quite a few people over the years.
Of reporters I have interviewed, oh boy, that's a tough one. Doug Polling from CBS News, who's actually a friend of mine. We
Hmm.
talked to Bob Fuss, who wrote a book about being detained by nuns in Colombia or something like Kidnapped by Nuns, I think was the name of it. It's an interesting whole story.
Sounds like a B movie.
Yeah, at least they weren't Amazon nuns, I guess. But in fact, yesterday, funny you say that, yesterday I talked to Bill O'Reilly.
Wow.
We've had Bill on before. He's a good guy. We've had Bernard Goldberg on.
Hmm.
We've had Mort Krim. Most people, if they don't know him from his local TV anchor work, he was the backup for Paul Harvey for many years, Mort Krim. And we've
Hmm.
had Larry Kane on from Philadelphia, one of my heroes. He's one of the few people I went totally fanboy the first time he called me.
Hmm.
He goes, Paul, it's Larry Kane. And I'm going, oh, Mr. Kane, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. He goes, Paul, cut the Mr. Kane or I'll have to gag. It's Larry. Yes, sir. And we booked an interview and we've gotten to be friends. He's a legend in Philadelphia, traveled with the Beatles.
Wow.
If you saw the documentary, 8 days a week,
I've not seen it yet,
Beatles,
but I'm looking forward to it.
Larry was prominently featured in that,
So is he like the fifth Beatle in Philadelphia? Because it seemed like each
more or
market back in the
less.
50s had their, or 60s had their own fifth Beatle. Like
Hmm.
in Los Angeles, where I grew up, was Dave Hall, the Hullabalooer. In New York City, I think it was Murray the K
Hmm.
at 1010 Wins, I think.
Yeah, Larry traveled with them on their North American tours. He's the only reporter who went on all the tours. And his book, he wrote one book about them called Ticket to Ride. Then he wrote another one called Lennon Revealed about John Lennon and his life between the Beatles and when he passed. John Lennon, a lot of people don't know this, actually came and did the weather on Channel 6 in Philadelphia one night. Larry was the anchor, and the weatherman was off, so they had John do the weather, and there's a video of it floating around somewhere.
Wow. Yeah,
And
because I remember most people know about John Lennon talking with Howard Cosell for like
mhm.
8 or 9 minutes on Monday Night Football, but that one is an event that most people probably don't know about.
Larry's also written when they were boys about the young Beatles. And he, like I said, he knows the stuff. I mean, he's a legend, and he's taught me a lot. Um, I know there are others, and I'm drawing a blank right now. One that comes to mind instantly from my North Carolina days, Larry Stogner, who was the main anchor at WTVD in Raleigh, Durham. He
Hmm.
passed away of ALS a few years ago.
Oh
But
no.
Larry was on our show and told his story. He had some really good reporting stories to tell, and he worked right up until about a year or so before he passed. And Larry, you know, was a good. I told him, I said, "You taught me a lot," and he said, "How did I do that?" I said, "I watched you. I would watch people say like, okay, I like what this guy's doing. I can do that, or I shouldn't do that." There are some people who would get on the air and go, this is, they'd make smacking and they're like, in the news, okay, don't do that. When I edit interviews, I take that out because it drives me up the wall.
Hmm.
If they ever want to send me down to Guantanamo Bay, they play about 2 minutes of that. I'll confess to anything. Um, but I've had the privilege of interviewing quite a few. Jay Barbary of NBC News. He was their space guy for years. He was based down in Florida. And I remember we had him on the show, and at one point I said, well, what's going to be next? And he said, Paul, I don't know. He said, I'm getting on up there. I said, oh, come on. He goes, no, Paul, I'm in God's waiting room. And yeah, I mean, what do you say to that? I
Yeah.
think he was in his 80s then. And I said, are the magazines new? I didn't know what to say. And, he burst out laughing. But yeah, when somebody says, I'm in God's waiting room, you think like, whoa, that's not something you hear every day.
No.
But he was great too. He talked about the space, uh, covering all the space shots down there at Cape Canaveral. And I've been lucky. I've been lucky, Josh. I've gotten to talk to a lot of notable people. Cousin Brucey, who's not a newscaster, but legendary DJ,
Oh yeah.
and Ward Quall. Not a household word to most people, but if you've heard of WGN TV in Chicago, he's the
Hmm.
guy that put it on. And
Wow.
got to interview him one time. Such a gentleman. He was actually in a wheelchair. He just had hip surgery, and he insisted on standing up. When I went over to meet him, Mr. Cuomo, he stood up. And I said, "No, that's okay. I understand you had surgery." And at the end of the interview, he stood again. And I said, "Mr. Quall, you don't have to stand up." He said, "Yes, I do, young man. Someday you'll understand why."
Mm.
but I was just, I mean, just a class act.
Wow.
And Tom Joyner, not the fly jock, but the other Tom Joyner, who owned 57 radio stations, based in North Carolina, he's the guy who made my whole career possible. Mr. J, if you're listening, I can never thank you enough. But he was great. He took a chance on this, dopey old college kid to do the show and then to do some news, and the rest is history.
Wow. I mean, all these people you got to interview over the years, and it's like, and did you get any photos with them? I mean, or was it such a great moment that you forgot? Oh my gosh, I forgot to get a picture with them because I was just so in the moment that I just didn't think about it.
Funny you say that. Some of them, yes. When I first started out, I was bad about that. But when I was at MTSU, one of my professors said, you should not do that. It's unprofessional. Well, that was before social media. Now, I mean, you got to have it. There
Hmm.
are a few people I would love to have had photos with that I didn't. Ed Koch, John Lindsay, former mayors in New York.
Hmm.
Um, Somebody took one of me interviewing Senator Bill Frist, but they never sent it to me. So there's one out there. I did get one with Fred Thompson, Senator Fred Thompson.
Hmm.
Uh, the last movie he was in, he came and did an interview, and he was absolutely hilarious. He got killed in the movie. I don't even remember the name of the movie, but
Oh,
after it was over, I said, Senator, I'm so glad to see you're alive. He goes, not as glad as I am, Paul. And, Fred was 6'5" and he was a hoot. But there are a few I wished I'd gotten photos with. Larry Kane, I've got one. I cherish that. I've got with a lot of people. And now
Mhm.
I make sure I do that. Yesterday, when I interviewed Bill, we were on Zoom, just like we are now. But I learned something, Mr. Tech Wizard here. You can take a picture on the computer, print the screen. So I did. So I'm going to get that frame, put that up in my office because it looks, like we're co-anchoring. I'm sitting in front of a big map and
Mhm.
he's sitting in his studio. So I thought, man, that'll be cool to hang on the wall. But yeah, I'm pretty good about doing that now. Some of the photos aren't so great. Like the one I got with Tom Brokaw, the flash didn't go off, so he sent me a signed one, as did Ted Koppel. They were at the same event, actually. I
Mm.
was a dopey college kid, but the flash died. That was an old 110 Instamatic.
Oh
Shows you how long
man.
ago that was. And now I even have a phone. Most people are like, Paul, you're so technically challenged. I have a real honest to gosh phone right here. And it takes pictures and
Yeah,
video.
mine too.
Yes. Twins. We're
I
phone
know.
twins.
It phone
Yes.
twins, and this is a brand new
Yes.
one from last year, and this one
Oh,
is much better than the one I had beforehand.
I got to
Um,
get a new one. This one's getting old.
Yeah, because sometimes the cool thing about the phone is they'll take multiple pictures, so at least we have a couple to choose
Hmm.
from, rather than oh my gosh, I hope a couple weeks later that photo turned out right. I'm not blinking, they're not blinking, or we're not both not blinking, and now it's just like so simple. Where it's like, okay, this is a bad one, delete. And it's just like wow. I mean, probably about I don't know 25 years ago, I thought about it for the first time when somebody at singles group at my church at the time said, "Hey, check this out." I was like, "Oh my gosh, you and James Taylor, where'd you meet him?" He says, "Well, I was just walking down the street, Ventura Boulevard, and I saw him. I said, 'Hey, Mr. Taylor, I really love your music.' He says, 'Oh, thank you.'" He's like, and he said, "May I get a picture with you?" He said, "Sure." And so he did that. I was like, at these events I go to sometimes, I gotta bring a camera next time. And about a year later, I finally did, and it was a game show signing with Peter Marshall for his book Backstage with the original Hollywood Square. Now, I didn't get a picture with Pete that day, but I did get a bunch of other pictures with people like Tom Kennedy, Susan Stafford, the original Wheel of Fortune hostess, um, and a couple of others as well. Oh, Tom Poston as well. He
Oh,
was really funny. He said, the finger was on his lens. Just kidding.
I can hear him saying that.
He it was funny. He had the same mannerisms in real life as he did on TV, but he was sharp as a tack. That was the funny thing about it. And by that point, he was married to Suzanne Flechette, and Suzanne was like, "Tom, let's go." because she had that smoker's voice and stuff. I didn't get one with her, but I did get one with him. But that was a fun event. Then 4 years later, I did get a picture with Peter when he was honored at the Game Show Cars convention. So and I've gone to different, like last year there was a quiz show expo, and the pictures cost money to take with the stars. But you know what? Might as well make the investment because when am I going to get to do this again, right? And
Exactly.
it was worth and met some really cool people there. I mean, Ruta Lee, the original High Rollers hostess, she was such a sweetheart. They were all nice, but I mean, as far as the extra, like to 11, if you will, on a scale of 1 to 10, she was definitely that. And even got to take a picture with the Press Your Luck whammy, and that was free. So he didn't take my money
I'm
to.
surprised they didn't charge more for that one.
I know.
I mean, the whammy was the star of the show.
Yeah, he was. He really was. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons people watch the show is to see what was the whammy going to do next. I mean, that was just, and the whammy's voice sounds so much like Urkel from Family Matters.
Oh,
I'm wondering now if Urkel used whammy for inspiration for his voice. Uh, but now, also, you were after WLAC, you were at Metro Traffic, which is, I think, owned by Clear Channel, or is it Cumulus? I
it
forget
is
what it is.
now.
Oh, okay.
Then it was owned by, well, it was owned by Metro Networks
Hmm.
because when I started with it was Skyview Traffic. They got taken over by Metro. And then Metro got taken over by Westwood One because for
Hmm.
the longest we had to say, Metro Networks, a Westwood One company. This is Paul Ladd. How can I help you? So it's a running gag when any of us see each other, we say, yeah, we worked at Metro Networks. Somebody will say a Westwood One company. And this is the old Westwood One.
Hmm.
And I was there and was local news anchor. I did traffic. I did news for several affiliates. I was the de facto news director until they got somebody official who wanted to do all the paperwork. And I was still the senior anchor, lead reporter. I was the front guy, the face, so to speak, of the news department. And then I became the state correspondent for Tennessee. I think the official title was national correspondent, but because you had one in each state, we called it state. But my business card said national correspondent. And, that,
Oh,
that sounds kind of cool.
yeah.
So we did a little bit of that, covered some exciting stuff. Almost got hauled out once by the Secret Service when Attorney General Janet Reno was in town.
Mm,
They would not let me in, and I was on the list, and they threatened to have me thrown out. So,
dang.
yeah, somebody made a scene as he was being pushed out the door, namely me, because everybody was watching. I was like, "You're letting people in with no press credentials. I've got press credentials. I'm on the list. You're not letting me in. Why?"
Hmm.
So I just said, "Ladies and gentlemen, your tax dollars at work." I left, made a couple of phone calls. And my boss, or the guy that ran the Nashville office, John Hall, who had
Hmm.
been my boss, I guess he wasn't at that point, but we were still in the same building. He said, "We'll take care of it." Made some phone calls. We got some sound and stuff from other people, and we had my observations, and we had a story. And basically, to the overzealous guys who wouldn't let me in. Ugh. So it had a happy ending. But yeah, we covered a little bit of everything there. And I was there 2 times.
Hmm.
And second time I was back, I was doing a local news anchor. Guess the biggest story I got to cover there was Condoleezza Rice spoke at Vanderbilt. And my colleague Mary Perrin was up near the podium. They had me back in the press gallery in case anything weird happened. And the only weird thing that happened was the then chancellor's wife, who became later infamous for smoking weed in the chancellor's mansion, she was leading a protest. And I'm thinking, like, yo, they're not married anymore, and that's probably part of why. Um, I mean, I don't know if she was on something that day, but it was just a very strange thing that the chancellor's wife is leading a protest. I'm thinking, like, if you don't like the speaker, don't go.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm here because I have to cover it. But Metro Networks was fun. We had a family vibe. We still get together every so often and talk about the good old days. We all have stories about different things. We had one traffic reporter who I will not name
Hmm.
in case he's watching. But one day he said on the air, and we've got a lot of traffic out there today, especially on the roadways themselves. Well, where else would the traffic be? Uh, One time I was out of town and a story broke, a tornado hit near the airport. The same guy ran into the newsroom, according to other people. I don't remember where I was out of town, probably on
Mhm.
vacation or something. And he grabbed a tape recorder and some stuff and he said, Paul would want me to go cover this. And I'm thinking like, and they told me, and I said, I would. He opened with the infamous, it is one of devastation. One what? Um, Another story that happened, again, I was out of town. Somebody died. Albert Gore Sr. died. I actually called the corporate news desk in Phoenix and said, do you want me to come back? They're like, no. I said, I've got somebody there that's going to handle it. I did that before I even called them. And they said, no, 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 you're fine. When I got back, I got an upbraiding from one of the VPs who said, you should have known when he was going to die. And I'm like, what am I, psychic?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have people calling me up saying like, like, hey, I'll call you when I die. Like, hello. Hi, Senator. Oh, you died. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I mean, that doesn't happen. Yeah, I'm not psychic. I
Even the
were, I wouldn't be
psychics aren't
working where I am
psychic.
now.
Like the Psychic Friends Network went
Yes,
bankrupt. They couldn't even predict that they're going to go out of business.
I know. I'm not Miss Cleo here.
Who wasn't even Jamaican. She was a lady from New Jersey.
That was a hoot. I mean, you got all the people that fell for that stuff.
And I'm hearing the voice right now, that fake Jamaican accent she put on. Well, we got about a minute to go here, and I'd like to talk to you next time about your current work with the the World Christian Broadcasting that you're doing right now.
I'd
And
love to.
thank you for again coming on here and sharing some of the stories. And also, if there's anything else you want to share next time that we didn't get to, we'd love to hear that as well.
Absolutely, Josh. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs. Until next time, keep your mind on the things above. And as you hit that open road, don't be a slowdown spectator.